Hello everyone, my name is Jendra Reddy and I'm a CSC data science student at Iare Hyderabad. In this video, I'm going to explain about the vocabulary. What is vocabulary? A vocabulary is a set of familiar words within a person's language. A vocabulary, usually developed with age, serves as a useful and fundamental tool for communication and acquiring knowledge. Acquiring an extensive vocabulary is one of the largest challenges in learning a second language. Definition and usage. Productive and receptive knowledge. The first major change distinction that must be made when evaluating word knowledge is whether the knowledge is productive, also called achieve, or receptive, also called receive. Even within those opposing categories, there is often no clear distinction. Words that are generally understood when heard or read or seen constitute a person's receptive vocabulary. A person's receptive vocabulary is usually the larger of the two. For example, although a young child may not yet to be able to speak, write, or sign, they may be able to follow simple commands and appear to understand a good portion of the language to which they are exposed. In this case, the child's receptive vocabulary is likely tens, if not hundreds, of words, but their active vocabulary is zero. When the child learns to speak or sign, however, the child's active vocabulary begins to increase. It is also possible for the productive vocabulary to be larger than the receptive vocabulary. For example, in a second language learner who has learned words through study rather than exposure and can produce them but has difficulty recognizing them in conversation. Degree of knowledge. Within the receptive productive distinction lies a range of abilities that are often referred to as degree of knowledge. This simply indicates that a word gradually enters a person's vocabulary over a period of time as more aspects of word knowledge are learned. Roughly, these stages could be described as never encountered the word, heard the word, but cannot define it, recognizes the word due to context or tone of voice, able to use the word and understand a general and or intended meaning, but cannot clearly explain it, fluent with the word, its use and definition. Depth of knowledge. The differing degrees of word knowledge imply a greater depth of knowledge, but the process is more complex than that. There are many facets to knowing a word, some of which are not hierarchical, so their acquisition does not necessarily follow a linear progression suggested by degree of knowledge. Several frameworks of word knowledge have been proposed to better operationalize this concept. One such framework includes nine facets: orthography, written form, phonology, spoken form, reference, meaning, semantics, concept and reference, register, appropriacy of use or register, collocation, lexical neighbors, word associations, syntax, grammatical function, morphology, word parts. Definition of word. Words are can be defined in various ways, and estimates of vocabulary size differ depending on the definition used. The most common used definition is that a lemma, the inflected or dictionary form that includes walked but not walks, walked, or walking. Most of the time, lemmas does not include proper nouns, names of people, places, companies, etc. Another definition often used in research of vocabulary size is that word family. These are all the words that can be derived from a groundword. Example: the words effortless, effortlessly, effortful, effortfully are all part of the word family effort. Estimates of vocabulary size range from as high as 200,000 to as low as 10,000 depending on the definition used. Types of vocabulary. Reading vocabulary. A person's reading vocabulary is all the words recognized when reading. This class of vocabulary is generally the most ample, as new words are more commonly encountered when reading than when listening. Listening vocabulary. A person's listening vocabulary comprises the words recognized when listening to speech. Cues such as the speaker's tone and gestures, the topic of discussion, and the conversation's social context may convey the meaning of an unfamiliar word. Speaking vocabulary. A person's speaking vocabulary comprises the words used in speech and is generally a subset of the listening vocabulary. Due to the spontaneous nature of speech, words are often misused slightly and unintentionally, but facial expressions and tone of voice can compensate for this misuse. Writing vocabulary. The written word appears in registers as different as formal essays and social media feeds. While many written words rarely appear in speech, a person's written vocabulary is generally limited by preference and context. A writer may prefer one synonym over another, and they will be unlikely to use technical vocabulary relating to a subject in a which they have no interest or knowledge. Final vocabulary. The American philosopher Richard Rorty characterized a person's final vocabulary as follows. All human beings carry about a set of words which they employ to justify their actions, their beliefs, and their lives. These are the words in which we formulate praise of our friends and contempt for our enemies. Our long-term projects, our deepest self-doubts, and our highest hopes. I shall call these words a person's final vocabulary. Those words are as far as we can go with language. Beyond the limb is only helpless passivity or resort to force. Vocabulary growth. During its infancy, a child instinctively builds a vocabulary. Infants imitate words that they hear and then associate those words with other objects and actions. This is listening vocabulary. The speaking vocabulary follows as a child's thoughts become more reliant on their ability to self express without relying on gestures or babbling. Once the reading and writing vocabulary start to develop through questions and education, child starts to discover the anomalies and irregularities of language. In first grade, a child who can read learns about twice as many words as who cannot. Generally, this gap does not narrow later. This results in a wide range of vocabulary by age 5 or 6, when an English speaking child will have learned about 1500 words. Vocabulary grows throughout one's life between the ages of 20 and 60. People learn about 6,000 more lemmas, or one every other day. An average 20-year-old knows 42,000 lemmas coming from 11,100 word families. People expand their vocabularies by, for example, reading, playing word games, and participating in vocabulary related programs. Exposure to traditional print media teaches correct spelling and vocabulary, while exposure to text messaging leads to more relaxed word acceptability constraints. Importance of vocabulary. An extensive vocabulary aids expression and communication. Vocabulary size has been directly linked to reading comprehension. Linguistic vocabulary is synonymous with thinking vocabulary. A person may be judged by others based on their vocabulary. Wilkins, 1972 said, without grammar, very little can be conveyed. Without vocabulary, nothing can be conveyed. Vocabulary size. Native language vocabulary. Estimating average vocabulary size poses a various difficulties and limitations due to the different definitions and methods employed such as word, what is a word, what is to know a word, what sample dictionaries are used, how tests were conducted, and so on. Native speakers' vocabulary also vary widely within a language and are dependent on the level of the speaker's education. As a result, estimates vary from 10,000 to 70,000 word families or 70,000 to 42,000 dictionary words for young adult native speakers of English. A 2016 study shows that 20-year-old English native speakers recognize on average 42,000 lemmas, ranging from 27,100 for the lowest 5% of the population to 51,700 lemmas for the highest 5%. These lemmas come from 6,100 word families in the lowest 5% of the population and 14,900 word families in the highest 5%. 60-year-old knows an average of 6,000 lemmas and more. According to another earlier 1995 study, junior high students would be able to recognize the meanings of about 10,000, 12,000 words, whereas for college students, this number grows up to about 12,000 to 17,000, and for elderly adults, up to 17,000 or more. Foreign language vocabulary. The effects of vocabulary size on language comprehension. The knowledge of the 3,000 most frequent English word families or the 5,000 most frequent words provides 95% vocabulary coverage of spoken discourse. For minimal reading comprehension, a threshold of 3,000 word families, 5,000 lexical items were suggested, and for reading for pleasure with 5,000 word families, 8,000 lexical items are required. And one threshold of 8,000 word families yields a coverage of 98%, including proper nouns. Second language vocabulary acquisition. Learning vocabulary is one of the first steps in learning a second language, but a learner never finishes vocabulary acquisition, whether in one's native language or a second language. The acquisition of new vocabulary is an ongoing process. There are many techniques that help one acquire new vocabulary. Memorization. Although memorization can be seen as tedious or boring, associating one word in the native language with the corresponding word in the second language until memorized is considered one of the best methods of vocabulary acquisition. By the time students reach adulthood, they generally have gathered a number of personal memorization methods. Although many argue that memorization does not typically require the complex cognitive processing that increases retention. Sagara and Alba, 2006, it does typically require a large amount of repetition and spaced repetition which flashcards in exam establish is an established method for memorization, particularly used for vocabulary acquisition in computer assisted language learning. Other methods typically require more time and longer to recall. The keyword method. One way of learning vocabulary is to use mnemonic devices or to create associations between the words. This is known as the keyword method, Sagara and Alba 2006. It also takes a long time to implement and takes a long time to recollect. But because it makes a few new strange ideas connect to it, many help in learning. Also, it presumably does not conflict with Pavo's dual coding system because it uses visual or and verbal mental faculties. However, this is still best used for words that represent concrete things as abstract concepts that are more difficult to remember. Words lists. Several word lists have been developed to provide people with a limited vocabulary, either for the purpose of rapid language proficiency or for effective communication. These include basic English 850 words, special English 1500 words, general service list 2000 words, and academic word list. Some learners' dictionaries have developed defining vocabularies which contain only most common and basic words. As a result, word definitions in such dictionaries can be understood even by learners with a limited vocabulary. Some publishers produce dictionaries based on the word frequency or thematic groups. Thank you.